The market research is in. That's right. The facts are here. Most quilters like cats, and all cats love quilts. So Moda came out with this really fun line called Catnip, and I've used it in this cool quilt behind me you see here to make these crazy cat stars. Let's get started. It may be a bit easier to see that crazy cat on point there that forms up our star. But yeah, we're going to use a really fun new fabric line called Catnip by Moda in a pre-cut pack here and a little bit of yardage to make this really fun quilt you see here behind me. Now let's look at the quilt before we dive into the supplies so you really understand what you're building. We're doing all of this work you see basically 4 times. So it's just a quadrant base quilt. So this is 1, and the same thing is duplicated here and just divided by some sashings. And it's super, super easy to make. We're just going to use half square triangles, some snowball corners, and some regular squares for our construction. But I'll take you through it step by step. Let's start with those supplies, right? So like I said, there's that catnip that I love so much from Moda. So I've used a bunch of this packet here, but I also went ahead and grabbed some of the honeybun white. These are the 1.5 inch strips. And I've also used some of the black yardage. Now this yardage actually, as you can see from the top here, is one of the prints that's in the pre-cut. So there's a square of this in here also. But for the yardage on the top of the quilt to make the parts and pieces, I've used about 3/4 of a yard. I also have it on the back and on the binding, so 2.25 yards will do the whole project for you. Now, we're going to go ahead and address this in a few different steps. So I'm just going to put my little reference CAD up here for a little bit. And I've already started taking apart one of my pre-cuts, so I'm going to ask you to do the same thing with me right now. What I want to do is I want to get all of the black squares separated out of here because we're going to use our black squares from the pre-cut package as our snowball corners. And if you don't know what a snowball is, I'm going to show you in a second. Don't you worry about it. It's just a fun quilt term. Okay, so I've removed the black and I'm going to use the whites, the creams, and the grays as my pre-cut for the rest of the units for the half square triangles and things as I go through. I'm cutting my yardage here that I have into a couple different size strips. So we're going to have some 4.5 inch strips that will be subcut into 4.5 inch squares. And we also have 5 inch strips that will be cut into 5 inch squares. And like I said, let's get walked through there. Let's get all of our hardest sewing done first today. What do you say? The half square triangles. And they're so easy, it'll be a snap. But what I want you to do is I want you to match up one of the squares you cut from your yardage of the black. So this is a 5 inch square. And I want you to match it up with one of the white or cream of the pre-cut squares. So for these kinds of half square triangles, what we're going to do is we're going to take out a Sharpie or a pencil. And on the lighter color fabric, I'm going to draw a straight line from point to point. Just a little light, faint, straight line from point to point. That is going to be a cut line down the road, so I'm not too worried about the ink showing up. I'm going to make sure my squares are nice and aligned, and now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of that drawn line. I have cotton thread in my machine today. And I'm just going to go ahead and look at the edge of my presser foot as my seam allowance. It's a little bit wider. So I'm just going to cheat just a scotch there. Lock this in. Take your time and sew a real nice straight line. Lock that in. You can cut that thread and then just go on over and do the same thing on the other side of that line. Real easy, but great practice. Okay, so now that that has been stitched, I better warm up my iron over here before I cut because we're going to want to press these. So I'm going to use that ruler just like I did to draw the line, but now I'm going to cut the line. And I really find it's best to do it this way. It keeps everything nice and secure. Yes, I could have just cut the line, but then I would have been dealing with these bias edges and a little bit less secure, and I just find that this works the best for me. You can do it however you like. I'm going to go ahead and press to the dark side by holding that dark piece of fabric up in the air. And what you'll see here is that the squares we were just handling have yielded exactly the same 2 half square triangles. But if you look through me at the quilt behind, you'll see those cat ears, which these pieces make, really aren't using the same fabrics. So I won't even bother pressing this one right now. I will later, but I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to use a combination from some of my other pieces I have laid out here to put those together as I bring all of my blocks back in. Okay? So you need 2 of the half square triangles for the cat head block itself. We also want to talk about, like, let's say, you know, sometimes your half square triangles didn't come out real square. And I was just going to dive into the square concept here, but it reminded me, we really want our precision and our accuracy. So maybe you haven't seen this trick before. Once you've pressed this out, I do really want to go ahead and square the block down to 4.5 inches. Now, most rulers will have these really cool 45-degree lines on them. And those 45-degree lines can be utilized along that seam allowance. So the first cut I would do is I'm going to see this here, and I'm going to trim this line so I have a nice 0 mark, like this. Let me move, make sure my head wasn't in the way there. So I've got this line, and it's based right now just on this one diagonal, okay? Now, I can move that straight line over, and I can cut a perfect 4.5. Except for I almost got a perfect 4.25, didn't I? I knew something didn't look right in there. Okay, so I'm looking at my line on the cut that I made to now trim the other side. You may go back to your diagonal if you would like to keep that squared up. You probably should, right? So that's going in there. Now this is up here, and my line over here is at 4.5. Let me make sure I've got this all perfect, so I'm giving you a good example. Okay, and I'm going to trim this down. So using that diagonal to keep things square, I believe this is an old method called the trim to true. But when you're going to mount in these half square triangles up against perfectly cut squares, we probably better make sure they're as crisp as possible. So that's a real good way to get that half square triangle squared up if it looks like it wasn't squared for you. And again, do all of your sewing of your half square triangles first so that they're all set aside and stacked so you can mix and match your color choices. Okay? And now let's talk about that snowballed square. So you're going to need another one of your pieces from your pre-cut packet, and you're going to want one of those squares that you had set aside. Right? So let's use one that's not our polka dot so you can really see what we're doing. This is one of the pre-cut squares. We need to divide that into quarters as well. So this is a 5-inch square, so that means 2.5 inches for the quarter. And I'm going to cut it here. And I'm not going to move it, and I'm just going to turn and I'm going to cut it here. Because you're going to need these smaller squares to create those snowballs. So you have those 4 pieces like that now. Some folks will take and press these things with the right sides out, like this. And then what we're going to do is we can take this, and it's going to fit basically onto this corner, like yay. So when I fold this open, this here becomes the sewing line. Other folks will take and draw their line. I prefer the drawn line because I think it reads a little straighter, and I'm not dealing with this fold. Either way, what I need to know, though, and this is something that these snowballs are kind of new for me, so I really like to go slow, right? I want to make sure I get it right. This is going to be sitting on here just like this. It's going to fill in this corner here. I'm going to sew across this line. So therefore, if I'm going to build this way, I'm going to lay this just right here, just the same, and I'm going to sew across this line. Okay? So until you get your orientations really quick, don't rush over to the sewing machine with a whole pile of them, or you might have to try out a new seam ripper or something like that. So now we're just going to sew right over that line. Backstitch and cut your threads, and until you're a perfectionist with this, right, you can come over here and look and make sure that it presses open correctly, like that. Or the other thing we could have just done was go ahead, and we do always want to finish by trimming off the 1/4 inch seam allowance down in here. Okay, like yay, like that. Okay, so of course you'll have several of those squares available. And then the last thing we would have done for this piece or any of the other pieces, I was getting so excited to get that last square in here, is to square it down. So remember, our half square triangles have finished now at 4.5. I asked you to make your other strips at 4.5 to make our squares, so therefore our snowball also needs to be cut down to 4.5 as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this. This is the important part of the piece. So this edge is a true edge in my eye, and I'm going to come to my 4.5 mark, and I'm going to trim it this way. Then I'm going to rotate it. Looking at my 4.5 again, and I'm making sure this line down here is nice and straight as well. And of course at the top, I cut this down, and now my snowballed square is also the 4.5 that my half square triangles were. So let's bring in 2 of those, and these ones will be different. And when all goes well, I love it when all 3 of the white or the gray prints or cream prints are different shades, different prints themselves. So to build out our cat head, this is one of those 4.5-inch squares. So that's why I had you cut the 4.5-inch strip and then pre-cut down or sub-cut down your own 4.5-inch square so that you didn't have to keep trimming later on. So from here, your opposite square with the snowball is going to come in just like this. And then the snowball is opposite from the black square. And then these squares come in here to form the ears. So they come in and you just rotate them until they fit right. Or you've got the long side, and then the long side up against that snowball corner. Now those are all together, and as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, maybe I don't want those lines going through here, so let's just swap this one out for another one so that all looks unique, right? Because I like that look. And now we're going to go ahead and assemble these. So I'm going to first assemble these 2 squares on that seam, just like this. And I only flipped it over to manage that seam allowance for no other reason. If you saw my hands flip it over, there was no special trick there. After 20-some years of making quilts, I'm kind of particular about the way I do it, I guess. Okay. Obviously, a bit of a messy work environment is part of it, which is fun because I have a really tidy studio in between quilts, but during that quilt, my goodness, things get a little out of control. Let's make that seam come together too. Some of your squares might have a little stretch because of the way that they were sewn together or on the bias, so anytime you're doing patchwork, do your best not to push or pull on your seams. Just let the feed system of the machine work as it needs to. I'm going to just push this one up against the dark, pressing to the dark side. However, if I'm really managing my seam allowances, I will often try to make it so that these 2 seams are now going opposite directions on the back side. I don't know if I did it this time or not. Let's see. No, they happen to be heading the same direction right now. If you ever want to plan for that, you can. Sometimes it matters to me, sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to mount these together just like this. I'm still going to secure that that seam is right there. I've got a good pinch on it as I line up those first 2 corners. And that's just always a good way to help our patchwork look and stitch together nice and accurate. Let's back stitch these seams as well. Oh, this is going terrific. So once you have all of the 4 individual parts made, you have technically created for yourself another cat head block. So as I'm pressing out my squares here, I see my cat head come to life, and it's super, super fun. Okay, so there it is again, and I want to start building out the quadrants. Now, your brain might want to start in the center of the quilt at the star, but it really doesn't. Let's build our quadrant. So you're going to need 4 of your cat heads. I have 3 others already made. And what we're going to do is we're just going to lay all of these like arrows in the same direction now. So as I come in here, see how they're going the same direction like this? Even though in the center of the quilt they form the star itself. So these go here, and a couple of little quick layout things we could look at. So as I'm looking, see how this cream and this cream are the same print, and this white are the same print. I don't love that. So if I have an opportunity to mix things around a little bit, get things a little further apart, I could, I would, I should maybe. So I do a couple of momentary looks and glances at the quadrant, and then just like our 4 squares, we're going to sew these together, these two, then these two, and then we'll sew this seam together this way. Now let's look at the quilt one more time so you can really see how it builds itself. So basically what we were just working on, all of us together, was one of these quadrants here, right? This is all of those heads heading into the same direction. This is that star I was talking about here in the center. Don't focus on that. Now, also, we put in some of those skinny strips for sashing. So the easiest way to do that is go ahead and take one of your quadrants and sew a skinny strip on to the length of the quadrant, and then put on the other quadrant here. Do the same down below. Quadrant, skinny strip, quadrant, this way. And then you can join them with one long strip that goes all the way through. That's called sashing, like that. And I've done the same on these outer edges. Those are also the 1.5 inch strips. And then the black that you see right over here on this outer border, that was cut at 2.5 inches wide. And then the binding is put in on top of that as well. So you build up your whole quilt, and this is such a fun and easy quilt. Maybe it's the first quilt for one of you at home. So some of the ways you can machine quilt this, of course, one of my favorites is quilt by check. Send it to the good folks at Missouri Star Quilt Company. They'll quilt it for you. You could do stitch in the ditch because it's all really squares, right? So you could run your walking foot with a real nice thread that just invisible like a gray or a white or something that just falls in there, real simple. You could free motion this thing like crazy. So the quilting, you can really do just about whatever you want to do with it. Makes it really fun. So sometimes it is really a blessing to be inspired by the simplicity of the name of a fabric line, to see something fun dancing around in the background elements of your quilt, and then go after it with charge and really get excited. Like I said, the facts are out there. Most quilters love cats, and all cats love quilts, and I hope you feel the same way about us right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here, and while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action. Okay, and now if you come over here and you look at the quilt, you can see that was I doing something upside down? I was. I do that all the time. One time I had the whole quilt upside down on the wall.